Hello, everyone. Welcome to another podcast sponsored by the Institute for Ministerial Wholeness. I'm Mark Hosfeld, director of the Institute, and along with me is my colleague, Stephanie Bradshaw Smith, who's our associate director of the Institute. And today we're thrilled to have Dr. David Marx. And I think I need to give a little bit of a background to David. First of all, David and I have known each other for 50 years. We met when we were both working at Kettering Hospital in Kettering, Ohio, just outside of Dayton, Ohio. And he worked in transportation, pushing patients around, and I worked in trade distribution, pushing food around. And so there are many stories that could go along with that we won't go into. But Dave and I have known each other a long time. We actually graduated from high school together from Spring Valley Academy. And it's been so exciting to see how the Lord has moved and worked in David's life as a physician, an ORU graduate, and many decades in the area of emergency room medicine, and now starting and leading the functional medicine organization that he leads, that I'm going to have him give more details about as well, Integrity Functional Medicine. And so, David, welcome on board. It's great to have you. Tell us a bit about yourself and about what you're now leading.
Yeah, Mark, and hello everyone from Pennsylvania. I live currently just outside Harrisburg, which is Central State. Yes, I always take the long road to destinations, and I'm not sure I've made my destination yet. I'm looking for a city, right? Just like Abraham. Uh, yeah, so I went to college, studied theology, then decided that I really, really like healthcare medicine. And I then went to Oral Roberts University for my medical training. After that, I took a family medicine residency, then emergency medicine residency, worked in emergency medicine, which I loved for almost 30 years. And it was during the pandemic that I changed gears, and I won't go into it, but I more or less abruptly left emergency medicine. I see it really as God rescuing me. And it was after that, because I still loved healthcare, I loved helping people, that I I just felt a prompting to look into functional medicine. And in many ways, I feel like I've rediscovered and I'm fulfilling the original motivations of why I went into medicine. So that's a brief summary of where I'm at. And I've established a telemedicine practice where I help people from a preventative functional perspective. It's a complete, we'll get into it a little bit, but it's a completely different paradigm than I experienced. So it's been quite a transition. You're muted, Mark.
Any thoughts you want to add at this point, Stephanie?
Yeah, I'm just very excited about this conversation. I think it is so easy for us to think of spiritual formation and only keep it in the realm of spirit or emotions or all these other aspects. But I love how we are focusing in this three-part series this month on how spiritual formation and our physical well-being are actually part of being
Mm.
integrated and responding and caring for the one that God loves. And so I'm really excited to see this conversation unfold. Our body is not an obstacle to our spirituality. It's a sacred vessel and it deserves that honor and respect. So I really appreciate uh, this conversation that we're going to have today. I would love to hear more, David, about just this idea of functional medicine. Maybe can you give us an understanding of that? You have a background as 28 years in emergency medicine. You're board certified physician, but why the interest in functional medicine? Help us understand that.
Yeah, so functional medicine is, like I alluded to earlier, a completely different paradigm. Number one, it is science-based. And going back and learning functional medicine, I feel like I've almost gone back to medical school, the basic sciences of medicine, diving into an understanding biochemistry and its relationship to nutrition, genetics. It's been since 2000 that the human genome has been understood. And that came after my medical school. I was in medical school from 1984 to 1988. So yeah, functional medicine, number one, is science-based. It also takes a much more personalized approach, meaning it recognizes that we are all individuals. We have individual makeup of DNA. We have individual makeup of life experiences. And perhaps most importantly, it's really crucial to involve individuals in the decision making that pertains to their own health. One of the trends that we'll go into the comparison perhaps of conventional to functional medicine, but one of the trends that I noticed in medicine was the growth and dependence on guidelines. It's become more cookie cutter. It lacks the individuality, the personalization. Thirdly, functional medicine looks at root cause. We really like to, what we call, look upstream. Ask the question why. Why is something developing? And ask why multiple times. Fourthly, and this is what is really challenging, it looks at the body as a system of systems. That's pretty profound, and we can unpack that a little bit. But our bodies are they're intricately designed, and so to simplify it by thinking about a gut issue and go to a gastroenterologist, a nervous issue, go to a neurologist. The silos. Um, yes, I get that information we understand more and more, and it's impossible for every one physician to understand everything. So I can understand the perspective of the need for specialization, but we lose something. So that's it in a nutshell. Functional medicine, those characteristics: science-based, personalized approach, root cause, and looking at the body as a system of systems.
So when we're talking about functional medicine and then the conventional models that we've all grown up with, conventional medicine is good for like emergencies and surgeries and things such as that. But how is this different than conventional?
Yeah, you know what? You're touching on something really important, Mark, and I see them as complementary.
Okay.
The strengths of conventional medicine, like you just said, are the acute problems, accidents, acute heart attack, acute stroke, um, an acute infection. And we have a terrific system in the United States in dealing with that. The Achilles heel of conventional medicine, and I can relate to this personally, is that we're not dealing with chronic illness. We're not dealing with how best to help people live a good health span. We can maybe extend lifespan a little bit, but what is the quality of care when we extend that? I think that functional medicine does a really good job at trying to amplify health span.
Mm.
Another thing that we can compare and contrast is the toolbox is different. Conventional medicine primarily relies on a toolbox of medicines and procedures. Functional medicine really, at its best, leverages what we call modifiable lifestyle factors.
Mm.
Good nutrition, sleep, movement and exercise, healthy relationships, and stress mitigation.
Mm.
That at its crux are the things that we really like to leverage. So those are the primary differences that I see.
So when you talk about the body and how those signals are communicating dis-ease, you talk about a little bit about the dis-ease of our bodies. when you say that, it seems to communicate that the body is communicating, not necessarily malfunctioning, where one approach might focus on the times when our bodies need immediate care and attention because something is malfunctioning. But what you're talking about is understanding the systems that are creating health.
Yes. So when we had our preliminary discussions, I brought up the idea of dis-ease, which is basically breaking down the word disease and putting a hyphen between the S and the E.
Mm.
And functional medicine really does it likes to look at where can we pick up something that is coming down around the corner, so to speak. And and many times that can present as symptoms that may not be fully elucidated to a conventionally trained physician. And so to quiet things down and to, I would dare say, quiet the patient, a prescription is offered to take care of a symptom. And whereas I like to think of functional really looking at even at laboratory studies and looking at an optimum range and yeah, paying attention to those symptoms and asking why. Why is this going on? And really paying attention to that. Does that kind of answer your question, Steph? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead, Stephanie.
thank you for that explanation.
So, David, when you talk about this, everybody on this webinar and everyone that's going to be watching this webinar has been to a doctor. I would think they have. I had one great uncle that actually went to a doctor when he was 91. It was the first time he ever went, but he was a healthy farmer. But, you know, we've all experienced the dynamics of conventional medicine, and we kind of look, I think, even in our American culture, North American culture, I don't know what it's like in Europe. A lot of times where the places I've served in Central Asia, the accessibility of pharmaceuticals isn't that great. But then again, you can get pharmaceuticals over the counter that you couldn't touch here in the West.
Mhm.
But my point is, to me, this is a development that's a very much a part of our culture. Conventional medicine is so much a part of our culture that when we think about functional medicine, and we haven't heard those words put together before, we wonder, is this some kind of fad? But the research that I've been doing into it and conversations with you, to me, it's really like looking at the why and getting things down more to a granular level and us taking responsibility for ourselves
Mhm.
with the assistance of someone like yourself that's a medical doctor. And it's not, again, casting off conventional medicine whatsoever or pharmaceuticals, but it's looking at a different way to care for ourselves, like creating another lifestyle and culture. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. And you're touching on what where I alluded to in the personalization. And I think that we have in in our culture an awakening of people wanting to take responsibility. They're wanting to take advantage of the agency they have, the choices that they have. And so they're hungry for good information on how to live better. Um, you know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, organic food was for the wackos, or but you go into a market and there's it's become a thing because people have realized the dangers of pesticides and and things like that and its effect on our body. So yeah, personalization, personal responsibility is a really big deal. And um, I think that conventional medicine is coming around to that, but it really is. I think it's a part of what we call medicine 3.0. For medicine 1.0 was in the ancient ages where they would do bloodletting and all that kind of stuff. Medicine 2.0 the dawn of penicillin and antibiotics and those kind of things. But now we're understanding what we can take health to the next level. You're mute again, Mark.
Sorry, my apologies. So with this, then, and by the way, let me just say here, anybody has a question, please put it in the chat box and we will address it ASAP. Any questions about what we're talking about, we'll address that and we'll read the question, and then Dr. David Marx or David will answer it, and then we'll have it for others that watch this later as well. But in this, David, do our cells, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I was reading that even what we eat affects us at the cellular level. And of course, our cells make up everything we are in a physical way. Some of the reels you see on social media, I mean, now they're getting down to they can actually do video of an item inside one cell carrying a proton to another part of the cell. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's amazing. And to think that this came out of primordial goo is crazy. It has to be intelligent design behind it all. But in functional medicine, are we looking at the cell that way? Like, how are we taking care of our bodies in such a way that our cells are healthy, and therefore our cells are healthy, what they make up is going to be healthy as well?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We like to, and that when I say we, in the functional medicine world, we like to think of food as four things: food as medicine, food as information, food as community or relationship, and food as energy. And you're right. It does food, when we talk about food as information, the things that we eat, the one of the categories of the things that we eat are called phytonutrients. Those are the colors of all the different plants. So when you eat vegetables or fruits, it's great to eat a variety rather than just one type of fruit only. And it's those phytonutrients that bring in chemicals into our body, the food materials that feed our gut, the microbes in our gut. They create health and really boost our immunity, calm the inflammation in our bodies. Not only, and then also there are foods that provide for methylation, that promote the chemicals, the vitamins that promote something called methylation. Methylation is simply, I'll talk just a little bit of the weeds in biochemistry, is taking a carbon and three hydrogens, that's called a methyl group, and transferring it to another molecule. Methylation is super important for metabolism of hormones. We think of women with estrogen. Methylation is super important for DNA repair. Methylation is super important for switching on and switching off genes. There's your answer to what is food doing on a cellular level.
Wow.
It's fascinating.
It is. It is so intriguing. I see we have a question that's come up here from Hillary. She says, hi, my question is, when you went back to study functional medicine, where did you study? Like, is it a certification program or another degree?
Yeah, good question. We're really in a season where the field is somewhat still in its primitive state. Yes, so I pursued education through an organization called the Institute of Functional Medicine. ifm.org. They have a wonderful website and directory of functional physicians, um, a wealth of information to people who are inquiring and wanting to learn about it. So I pursued certification through them, and I will plan to continue to do so. There's another organization called the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, A4M. I'm also pursuing further training through them. They have excellent training along this. And then I'm learning to find out who are really reliable sources and learning to read their materials and listen to their podcasts. So that's been the primary source of my training and education. Um,
I think an excellent podcast to plug right now is the Huberman Lab podcast, which Andrew Huberman is a neurologist, ophthalmologist at Stanford University, a believer, by the way. We just
mhm.
found that out the other day. David sent me a link to him talking about his relationship with God. But here is at Stanford University, but he gets into these things too. So the Huberman podcast is an excellent podcast to go to. And
Yeah, no, Andrew Huberman's terrific, and he's a brilliant scientist, but he has a way of making things really understandable for
yes,
people who aren't scientists.
yes, an excellent podcast to listen to. We have another question, David. They write, I have concerns about insurance coverage and affiliation with local hospitals. I think functional medicine is an excellent approach to see that as the best approach to personal care. I'm a retired nurse who is part of the medical community since the 1970s. Conventional medicine has failed us.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is this is something that is really important that you're touching on. Um, there's functional medicine can be pretty expensive because unfortunately our current insurance systems don't pay for it or for a number of the tests. And so, although it can be covered under HSA and FSA accounts, um, so there is a cost to it. Uh, on the other hand, what is how much is good health worth to us? So it becomes a balance to that. So it's a difficult topic. I'm hopeful that in the not too distant future that there can be some insurance reform and some empowerment of individuals, making healthcare personalized. Again, that functional medicine principle where some of the funds that we pay towards insurance premiums, that there can be the reform that will cover this type of healthcare because it clearly has better answers for the predominance of healthcare problems in our nation.
For those of you, just want to take note, I put in the chat box the website for Dr. David Marx and how you can contact him. It's just www.integrityfunctionalmedicine.com. And I've been on that site. I've connected with David. And so there you can schedule an appointment with him and speak with him if you want to further the conversation as well. And I'm sure you can work out times if some of you are in time zones around the world that would be convenient for both of you. But he will respond. He responded immediately to me. And I don't think it's just because I've known him for 50 years either. Maybe it had something to do with it, but maybe not everything. But knowing David, he'd respond. He'd respond most definitely. But David, when you are,
Absolutely.
let's say that a person that's viewing this, they're saying, you know what, I do feel let down by conventional medicine. And uh, I use conventional medicine. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as the old saying goes, but I realize that science is discovering new things. And sometimes our systems that we get used to We just follow a certain way, like we talked about earlier with conventional medicine and the distribution of pharmaceuticals, rather than dealing with the problem, we deal with the symptoms. So if a person is thinking about, okay, I'm not going to stop my metformin or my statin yet, but I do want to know as I go on in life how I can really enter into a lifestyle that's going to make me healthy so that I could get off of these things, potentially. How would a person would how would they begin that process?
Yeah. I think that the best way is to look at the modifiable lifestyle factors. That is really where the biggest bang for the buck occurs. And where can one look at food, for an example? Where can we improve our what we feed ourselves? Where can we make sure that we're really looking to have food as medicine, good energy, what we talked about, those characteristics. Whole eating whole food, real food, and trying and doing our best. And it's often just takes small steps. We can't, I mean, we can do radical things, but it's important to think long term. What are the habits that we can make that will be sustainable? And so it's looking away from maybe the processed foods to real foods. And if we can do it as a family and as a couple, where we can prepare foods together, we can go to our farm, in the spring and summer, go to a local farmer's market together, just engage doing things together. I think that's one good way to start. Um, Look at sleep. What am I doing to improve my sleep? We talked about podcasts. A wonderful podcast is a guy named Matthew Walker, Matt Walker. He's written a book called Why We Sleep. Huberman has interviewed Matt Walker multiple times, and they've done a whole series on sleep. But the reason I bring this up is one of the things that we are all guilty of is that we're super active until it's bedtime, doing things mentally, um, whatever. And Walker talks about one of the problems that people may have if they're having trouble getting to sleep is they're doing the equivalent of driving into their garage at 60 miles an hour. Things don't end well. And that's kind of a good word picture. It's good to like settle down, dim the lights, um, relax a little bit, maybe take a hot bath. A hot bath is really important because we sleep best when our bodies are cool, our core temperature is cool. So a hot bath, yeah, it's hot, but when we get out, the blood vessels on our surface of our body have expanded, and so we're losing heat. And so the core temperature is actually lowering, and that's where we sleep best. Those are some ideas to begin with.
So, David, a couple things have come in here. One, Crystal asks, and we'll get to this first because it came before the next one. So, who are the voices that you trust? And she goes on to say, with the advent of social media, everyone seems to be an expert.
That's true. That's true. Um, I I like Mark Hyman, MD. He's one of the kind of the early fathers of functional medicine. Um, Mark is he comes from he comes from a Jewish background. He has himself uh, a pretty amazing story. A lot of these people who are influencers and leaders in functional medicine, they have personal stories where they were really quite sick at one time, and conventional medicine didn't help them. Mark had an issue with significant mercury poisoning and chronic fatigue, and the mercury had a big deal to deal with that. And it was through a functional approach that he recovered. Um, he has he's a prolific writer. He has really good podcasts. So I like him. We mentioned Huberman. Robert Lustig
Yeah.
is another doctor that is out there on YouTube and has written books. Mark, help me with the title. Metabolomic. I'm putting you on the spot. We'll come up with it.
I've read.
Robert Lustig, Lustig, MD. He's a pediatric and endocrinologist. I believe he was at University of California, San Francisco, or maybe Stanford or Berkeley, somewhere out there. But he writes about processed foods and its effect on metabolism, diabetes, and he's another one that takes these really complicated topics and really makes it understandable. And I find him really enjoyable to listen to and read.
Yeah. The title of the books, I've read two of his books, and they dramatically affected me, the way I approached food in particular, and also exercise. The one book I would recommend is called Fat Chance, and it really focuses on the place of sugar and processed foods. And his concern is, if we in the United States would approach sugar like we approach tobacco, that a lot of the healthcare issues in the United States would disappear because of what sugar and processed food does to us. And then he also talks about the importance of weight loss, but he says to really be healthy, you must exercise.
Mm-hmm.
That exercise brings health. So Fat Chance is one book. And then the other book it's a unique title, Metabolical.
The metabolical, that's it.
Metabolical, Metabolical. And I've read that as well. And I would encourage that. Another author, since we're on authors, I would recommend Dr. Jason Fung, who's a nephrologist. And I believe nephrology is the study of the kidneys.
Mm-hmm.
And he had all these diabetes patients, and he was thinking, is there a way that we could stop treating the symptoms? How can we eradicate diabetes and type 2 diabetes as well as one? And so he started doing research, found out there was a lot of research out of the 1920s and 30s on fasting. So he really is a huge proponent of intermittent fasting, which I practice. I also work it in with my fasting, my spiritual fasting, because we're holistic beings. You don't bifurcate fasting into my health and my spirituality. They're one and the same because we're one, right? We can't bifurcate ourselves. So that's another great author, Jason Fung, Fung.
Yeah.
And what he's written on the obesity code. And he also writes on type 2 diabetes as well.
Yeah. No, he's excellent.
David, I'd like to introduce somebody. I believe one of your patients has come on the webinar, and this wasn't set up beforehand, so we're just doing this live on this recording, and it's from Roger. And Roger says here, and now Roger, this is my intro for you, but you'd like to share what you and your wife have been benefiting from for the last 18 months. So yes, you're muted right now, if you could unmute yourself.
How's that?
Yeah, there you go.
I haven't been on very many of these, so I'm a rookie here. So, well, I didn't know if the Dr. Marx there, if you've ever heard of a product called X39.
No, because this is a live webinar.
Oh, okay.
What's up?
I'm going to go out.
Or you got Dr. Marx, did you hear my question?
X39?
Yeah, it's with a company called LifeWave, and David Schmidt is the CEO.
Yes. I wanted to make sure that you were speaking of what I was thinking of. Yes, I am familiar with LifeWave and the X39. So do you have a particular question about that so I can direct it?
Yeah, I just and I'm not doing this for selfish benefit at all, but a lot of things that you're touching on, this phototherapy patch seems to benefit in those areas. You mentioned sleep, mentioned I came in 15 minutes late, so I apologize for that. But I mean, it's given us a lot of health benefits as far as energy, uh, aches and pains. I don't have as many of the aches and pains that I have. I'm 65, so naturally at my age, we're going to experience those things. But there's a lot of people that I know that are using this that are experiencing uh, hair growth. Wife's fingernails have improved where they're not dry and cracked, and so that's helped her sleep. It's helped us sleep a lot better.
Yeah.
Um, but we've been using it for 18 months, the both of us, and I've got some friends using it too. They're sharing with me their benefits as well. But I guess main thing is just wanted to find out if you'd heard of it, if you looked into it any, or what's your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I do have some thoughts. So, a couple things. Uh, I looked into it, and actually, full disclosure, I was a distributor of it at one point. Couple things that I personally came down to struggle with. It's a multi-level marketing type of product, which um, I ultimately had problems ethically as a physician um, doing a multi-level where I could really it could become lucrative. And so there was a conflict that I had mentioning it to people. And I'm entrepreneurial enough that it became a distraction from what I felt was God's calling on my life. The other thing about it, yeah, I'm intrigued by the technology, but I found its results unpredictable with people. And so I prefer to have make recommendations that are a little bit more predictable. So that and different people will find their experience differently. And I get what you're saying and the success that you've had, but for me as a provider and making recommendations, I can't. And it's pricey. It can be, it can be best part of $100 a month for people. And for something that's not predictable, for me, that those were the points that I took myself out of the game.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Marks. I wanted to circle back to a couple of things that you were mentioning as you're talking about resources and trusted materials. A lot of the people that are on this webinar today are spiritual leaders, and there are kind of a range of responses that we see within Christian circles and within leadership circles as to how we take care of our bodies, how we deal with chronic stress, how we're dealing with all of that. And I'm wondering what you would say to this kind of subtle dualism that we see, where the spirit is good, but the body's inconvenient,
Hmm.
to help us kind of restore a better theology or a better understanding of why it's important for us to think about this and not necessarily use spiritual language to bypass some of the physical realities that we're dealing with.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, it can be really subtle because naturally we, we the spiritual is where we find hope and meaning and purpose and ultimate destiny for the kingdom. Um, so for me, it becomes a matter of emphasis and neglect. Are we placing all the emphasis on the spiritual and by default neglecting and letting the physical slide? And there can be a number of different reasons, and I think you're touching on one. The I think I believe the answer is more of reframing and coming to an understanding that if we really steward our physical health, our bodies, it'll only take our spiritual experience to a higher level. So it's more of a win-win rather than an either or.
Yes. Absolutely. I
So
think
how
it's
do you
go ahead.
counsel people who are dealing with chronic stress, which most leaders are under?
Yeah.
Do they recognize the signs and what do they do about it?
Yeah. So, you know what? It's tricky because sometimes the signs of chronic stress can be really subtle, and they're such that we are tempted to just push through it. Um, I have a personal experience with this. You know, life in emergency medicine, you know, like ministry leadership, uh, is really stressful, and we burn the candle at both ends. Um, for many years, as a personal example, for many years, I had reflux as a symptoms, acid reflux, heartburn. And so what did I turn to? Simply because my thought was, well, I have too much acid. I need to buffer the acid in my stomach. So you start with Tums, you go to Pepcid, you go to Prilosec or omeprazole or lansoprazole, and the best part of it is these things are all available over the counter, free, free of a prescription. You can just go to, and I can remember going to Costco and getting the big bundles because it was less expensive. Well, after a while, I didn't have heartburn anymore. The symptoms were taken care of. Well, guess what? Years later, I started having difficulty swallowing, and food would get caught in my esophagus. So I went and got it checked out, and I had a lot of inflammation and tightening. So, we talk about these symptoms that are early warning signs. Well, they can be subtle and we miss them, or we just neglect them. And then we miss what comes down the pike, the eventualities of neglecting them.
I think there's an important theological dynamic to this because in the Old Testament, we hear the word shalom, and a lot of people think, well, shalom means peace. And to a degree, there's an element of peace in it. But really, if you look up the meaning in the etymology, the history, the development of the word shalom, when somebody said shalom to another, it was really a word of blessing in a holistic way: body, mind, soul, spirit, vocation, economics, you know, every way that our human being, as God sees us as the Imago Dei, not as chopped up like in a Greek philosophical way. So much of our education and even the way we see ourselves in the church is very much an influence of the way that education has come to us from a Greek perspective. And when we say body, mind, soul, spirit, we think three, when really we should be thinking more of the Trinity as one: Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Well, when we look at ourselves, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and in our work, God is seeing us all functioning as one. So there's not this bifurcation when it comes to us. And that's why the importance of this webinar is, okay, this is really an act of worship when we care for ourselves. It's an act of worship unto God.
Mm.
It may not be singing in a church, which we certainly don't want to relegate worship to just what we do on Sunday morning together in church, but really Romans 12, 1 and 2, we live our lives as an act of worship. So that means everything in life. So there's not this bifurcation. So this is deeply spiritual, what we're talking about.
Yeah, amen. Yeah.
Dr. David, what would you say to people, especially leaders who maybe feel guilty focusing on their physical health? I think all of us would agree that there have been some extremes that we see demonstrated as it relates to care for the body, and we don't want to move to an excess in certain regards, or a self-absorption. But how do we view this as stewardship rather than a distraction from our call?
Yeah. I think that there's, to one degree, it's the reframing that we talked about. the importance of attending to the body enhances our spirituality. Um, on the other hand, there is a danger of paying perhaps too much attention to the physical. And maybe one part of what we see in this world in the secular sense is a lot of people have have gone to that extreme. They where they worship the body. It becomes a matter of idolatry. um, and and I sense it's because they're out of balance and haven't come to an understanding of God as their creator, and they are created for something even greater. They're an imager of God, or created in the image of God. And so I'm rambling here, but I want to focus back on the guilt. I think that it it becomes, if we can really understand our identity as created beings, sons and daughters of God, created to be a habitation place of God Himself, the Holy Spirit, temple of the Holy Spirit, Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 6. Um, I hope that embracing that frame of mind can alleviate the guilt, and try and keep it in the middle of the road perspective.
The element of our bodies, I came across this, I don't know where I got it. I thought of it, but anyway, it was something I put into a recent blog on our most recent newsletter, is that our body carries the call. Oh, it was
Mm,
a webinar I did, not a webinar, a podcast I did for Influence a couple of weeks ago, which is an Assemblies of God podcast for ministers and missionaries. But I said the body carries the call, and that is such an important thing to us to consider, why we should not separate uh, who we are spiritually from who we are physically as well. And so if we are going to be living our lives, and people are living longer, and are we going to live longer well? A lot of
yeah,
studies are showing, and I'm reading more books on aging because I'll be 68 this month. I start thinking about, okay, what I know now, what I've experienced over the last number of decades. Yes, I'm officially retired from Assembly of God World Mission, so to speak, but now we've started the Institute. How do I live on? They say in studies that the next 30 years, up to your 90, can be your most productive years if you keep your mind and your body. But you've got to do the kind of things necessary to keep your mind and body. And
yeah,
I've been talking to pastors that are in their 40s and they're very much out of shape. And I remember when I went to the doctor, I'll be candid here. I went to the doctor, my area directors in Cyprus. We based out of Cyprus, and I had my physical with my doctor, and she said to me, Mark, you have long life genes. This is in my 40s,
hmm,
long life genes. But if you don't get a hold of the way you eat and what you eat, you're going to develop type 2 diabetes. Well, guess what? I didn't listen to her.
mm,
I developed type 2 diabetes. And I take metformin for type 2 diabetes. But here's the thing, I didn't have to become a type 2 diabetic. I made the wrong choices. I owned that. I brought it on myself. And so, what we're talking about, if our body carries the call, no matter if we're in ministry, missions, or the marketplace, we've got to take this responsibility. It's really up to us, isn't it, David? I mean, we've got to make the right choices. Nobody's going to do this for us. When I go to the gym, which I hate to do, um, when I was on the road yesterday in Kansas City, I went to the gym in the hotel. I didn't want to go to the gym in the hotel.
yeah,
Nobody's going to go to the gym for me.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
So help us address this. I mean, it's a real psychological herder, but I think it's also, it gets into this whole thing where bodily exercise profits little. And somehow it's more spiritual to read my Bible than to go to the gym, when in actuality, you should be doing both.
yeah. Yeah. No, you're hitting the nail on the head. And actually, movement and exercise are probably the most important factors for enhancing health span. We're talking about health span versus lifespan. Lifespan is the chronological um, length of our life. And to some extent, um, we don't have full control over that. Um, but what we do have perhaps a little bit more, and they're related. Health span is related to lifespan. Um, but what we do have agency of what we can do through what's modifiable in our life over health span. And so the goal is to increase and to keep that health span high as long as we can. Um, Back to activity. That's probably one of the most biggest factors in developing lifespan. And one author that I like the idea is to think about what do we want our last decade of life to look at.
Mm,
He compares it to the Olympic exercise, Olympic activity of the decathlete, the decathlon,
mm,
where you're doing the decathletes are probably the best athletes of all the Olympians because they have to do a lot of things really well in order to win that gold in that category. And so what he says, you know what, think of it like we're all decathletes. And what do we want to look like? What do we want to be able to do in that final decade? You know, do we want to be able to reach over and pick up a grandchild or a great grandchild and pick them up off the ground and hold them? Do we want to be able to lift the carry-on bag and be able to put it into the overhead compartment of an airplane when we're traveling? Do we want to be able to walk, you know, and go hiking? What is it? You know, do we want to be able to get off the commode? I mean, it takes core muscle strength to be able to do that. Strength and muscle mass are huge predictors of frailty, you know, in the latter years. So, you know, it's to this point of
yeah.
the importance of these things.
David, if you could walk us through, let's say someone, we put the Integrity Functional Medicine website up on the chat box. So for those of you watching, it's integrityfunctionalmedicine.com for those listening to this. Suppose someone wants to contact you. Could you tell us what the process of you connecting with them would look like after they wrote you?
Yeah, number one, I would be interested in what they what is their concerns. Um, I want to make sure that we're on the same page, and it largely has to do with the conversation that we've just had. You know, it takes personal responsibility, a willingness to maybe adapt habits in one's life, because what really matters most is a willingness to embrace the lifestyle factors and maybe some change in there. And then I like to utilize questionnaires. You know, I've talked about the body as a system of systems. I have a questionnaire that is really helpful for me to look at where are some of the problems that could be where the answers may lie that could really give us traction the fastest. You know, are they really inflamed? Is one really dealing with a lot of aches and pains? Are they Are they struggling with weight? Are they struggling with fatigue? If as we dive in deeper into these different areas, it gives us an idea of where are some of the imbalances that we can try and utilize lifestyle and food. One thing that we didn't touch on is food sense. We live in a time where people have more and more food sensitivities, and many times they're unrecognized. And it's related to um, gut inflammation in our intestine. And
Mm.
well, how does that happen? Well, stress can lead to gut inflammation. We have what we call leaky gut. Leaky gut was a laughable term 2 or 3 decades ago. Well, guess what? If you go into the recognized medical literature on a website called PubMed, there are thousands of articles published every year on leaky gut, but it's in the medical term is enhanced intestinal permeability. It triggers all kinds of inflammation, stress, uh, uh, high cortisol states, toxins. There's so many different causes that can lead to all this. So that's where I like to go is find out where can we look and help and restore balance so the body can heal. God created our bodies to recover, to be resilient, and to heal.
Mm.
That's so good, Dr. Marks. We've talked a little bit about the rhythms of life, and one of the things that we talk about through the Institute is developing a rule of life, thinking about all of the dimensions of how we live, the practices that help support our growth, that support our holistic formation. And I wonder if you could just give us a few practical ideas of where to start. If we're thinking about this as a rule of life, what would be some practical next steps that each of us could consider adding into our daily lives?
Yeah. So under that, and it's such a good question, I like to think of sleep as sacred. Um, it there that's one. Number two, daily movement, and I'll come back and maybe have a couple comments on these. Daily movement, um, a nourishment rhythm, um, daily pause. Think contemplative prayer. Um, these are the rules that I find as really daily rule. These are daily rules or a rule of life. Sleep is there's so I could talk an hour on sleep. Sleep, there are so many things that happen in sleep. The brain, did you know that there is a, basically like a sewage cleaning system that takes place during deep sleep? All the debris and stuff that collects during the day, it's cleaned out during deep sleep. And when we shortchange ourselves, I did, it affects brain degeneration and all that. Creativity, um, um, problem solving, memory enhancement, all that stuff develops during the different steep sleep stages. Sleep is fascinating. Listen to Matthew Walker. You'll be blown away. So those are the things that I can think of, Stephanie. Sleep is sacred, daily movement. We talked about exercise. We talked about eating food, rhythm. And then I love the idea of a daily pause. That's so, and maybe even considering this is something that I have really been provoked about is, the Jewish people have a Shabbat, a day of rest. I'm really provoked and really wanting to dig into that idea personally. That is something that I'm very intrigued with.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. The Sabbath, and if you're involved
Right.
in ministry, Sunday usually is not a Sabbath. I remember when I pastored, often I would take Monday off. I should have taken more days off, but I took Monday off, and I stuck to that. But It's interesting at the Institute when we do spiritual direction with the pastors in particular. Sabbath is often something that's not even in the wheelhouse, and so
Yeah.
we work a lot with them on Sabbath, and it becomes a fulcrum of which then everything else daily and then weekly and even monthly begins to revolve around, and how it reforms their lives is very exciting. But that'd be really worth deeper study as to what you're saying.
Wow, someone's mentioning a reference in the chat about that.
Yes, Kristen writes, helpful resource on Sabbath is the book 27/6. Does that mean 24? I mean, 27/6 by Dr. Seath. Oh, 24/6. 24/6.
Oh, interesting.
I
I'm not familiar with that.
It's
but
a very
check it out.
good, it's a very good book written by I think it's Matthew Sleeth. I also have worked with his son, Clark Sleeth, but I think the author's name is Matthew Sleeth, and he is well known and does a lot on Sabbath, and he's a physician, and he has a lot of personal testimony of how it revitalized his life to begin living with a weekly Sabbath and practical ways of how we can actually do that and how God blesses that. So it's very useful.
Excellent.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Christine, for sharing that. Well, our time is winding down. There's one thing I would like to touch on before we introduce what's going to be coming up in the next 2 weeks, but the area of chronic stress and the impact of chronic stress on us. Could you address that, David, from a physiological and a spiritual perspective? What does chronic stress do to the body? I think a lot of us are chronic stress and don't even know it. I think the culture that we're in for overseas, even in the United States right now, very stressful.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So I've got a dog barking in the background there. So stress, we were created to manage stress short term. What has happened in our culture is that we experience stress nonstop. Now, it can be real, or it can also be perceived. Okay, that's where anxiety comes in. And so what happens as a result of that, the way our body is created, our brain ultimately tells our adrenal glands to put out a couple of things. One is adrenaline or epinephrine, and the other is cortisol. And so then there are feedback loops back to the brain that says, okay, we have enough cortisol, we have enough epinephrine. You can tell us that we don't need to keep doing on those. Anyway, chronic stress blunts those feedback loops so that we live with chronically elevated cortisol. Well, cortisol in itself it puts the body into a breakdown state rather than a build-up state. And so the result of that is, number one, on the gut, it can wreak havoc on the microbiome, which is the bacteria component. We haven't even touched on that. That's a whole nother world. It can wreak havoc, and therefore the leaky gut, then causing inflammation. Inflammation in the gut really is connected to inflammation in the brain. Well, how do we know we have inflammation in the brain? Well, we have a depressed mood. We can have anxiety. We can have brain fog. And so you see the connections where all these things are developed. And there's a great book on this whole system by a behavioral scientist, I believe, out of Stanford, called "Why Zebras Don't Have Ulcers." And zebras have a reason to have stress, when they have lions chasing them. But after that has passed, they go back to grazing. And guess what? They don't have ulcers.
That's a fun title.
Yeah,
We've
everybody
also,
keep the titles down.
and if you have been a part of the monthly newsletter, just for those that are watching, and if you were not a regular subscriber, we'd encourage you to sign up on the iamwholeness.org website. But in this last newsletter, and also on the website, you can go under the blog entries, and there are some additional book recommendations. If you want to dive a little deeper, in addition to the great resources that have been mentioned today, a few of the recommended resources on the Institute's website are The Body Teaches the Soul by Justin Whitmore Early. There's another book called What Your Body Knows About God by Robert Moll. And then there's also a book by David Mathis, A Little Theology of Exercise. Mark, is there anything you would like to add about those resources?
They are excellent resources. And like I said earlier, it seems to be there's a trend in publishing. The first I read of those books was What the Body Knows About God. And it's just amazing how we are created and how our body is so important in connecting. So there is this deep spirituality, and it's an InterVarsity Press book, so very solid and evangelical, nothing faddish or weird, deeply researched, but very readable. And so I would encourage that book. I read the book about a little theology about exercise, because we often make all kinds of excuses not to exercise, beginning with me. And so when you have a theology, it's God's word, God's instruction. So for me, it's a part of obedience, and that's why I read it. It's a very small book, but it's a very, very good book. And then the latter book, could you read that title again, Stephanie? The last one.
The one by Justin Whit. I just
Yes.
clicked off of there. It's a book by Justin Whitmore Early.
Yeah,
I just closed out that.
Yeah, I have it here in my library, but it's an excellent book because it really gets into all facets of exercise and eating and spirituality. Very readable book as well. I think it's probably the most informative and pragmatic of the three. So it's
The
like
Body Teaches the Soul.
Yeah, The Body
Yeah.
Teaches the Soul. Yeah, excellent book. I would encourage that book to read it. Thank you, Nelson, for putting that up there as well. And so read these, get into these. It'll lead to other books, the books that Dr. Marx has recommended. David, we want to definitely have you back at some point. This is the first time at the Institute that we've really done a heavy duty focus on the body. And we are going to be also focusing on the body next week on February the 11th, Wednesday, February the 11th at 10 o'clock Central Time. We are going to have Dr. Mark Andreessen. And Mark leads the Institute for Youth Studies. He's an Assemblies of God minister out of the Illinois district. And he is a person that has gone through an incredible health journey, so much so that I saw the before Mark and I knew what that Mark looked like. But then he lost over 100 pounds.
Wow.
No other medications, but just changing his diet and exercising, and how God got a hold of his heart about that. And when I saw him after he had lost it, when I came back from overseas, it was like, what? You're the same person? And so you can go to our website and see a before and after picture that he sent, but it's called Weight and Health, the journey to live longer and better. So he's going to be talking about the journey to live longer and better. And what he's going to be talking about really dovetails beautifully with what Dr. Marx has talked about today. I had a meeting with Mark yesterday to talk about the webinar, and so much what he said was dovetailing with the things that Dr. Marx had spoken to Stephanie and I about. And so we thought this would be a wonderful tandem to hear all this important science from Dr. Marx, but then next week talk about how do we implement that and make it a reality in our lives. And you'll very much enjoy the Mark shares. So register for that webinar next week. And then Stephanie, why don't you share with us about the February 18th webinar?
February 18th is the beginning of the Lenten season. And as you are likely aware of, that is also Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is a time when we're thinking about our mortality. From dust we came, to dust we will return. And so it's an opportunity for us to consider our spiritual formation as we think about the longevity of our life and how that interrelates. So it's a time, a season of repentance. It's a season of fasting, which affects the physical body as well. And so we thought that could be a wonderful complement to bookend this series.
Yes. So we're looking at this in a holistic way. And we just want to say again, thank you, Dr. Marx, for your time today. This has been excellent. I've learned a lot of things. I'm looking forward to furthering the journey with you. And I pray others will as well, as we steward ourselves, as we carry our call forward with healthy bodies and minds, because we are doing the things that we know that we should be doing to glorify God. And so with that, everyone, we'll say goodbye. Have a wonderful day. And again, this will be embedded on our website, perhaps later today, even tomorrow. And from there, share it with other people, because there are others that need to hear it as well. So God bless you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.